Welcome back to Hannity. A bombshell new report from the New York Times. The Justice Department is reportedly recommending that no civil rights charges be brought against Officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown. So, will President Obama, Eric Holder, Al Sharpton, and others apologize not only to Darren Wilson, but to Ferguson in general and the country? Now, let's not forget the grand jury decision back in November not to indict Wilson led to violent protests in Ferguson, and many people insinuated the shooting was racially charged.
Imagine if a black cop had went in a white neighborhood and shot a white 6 times and said, well, you got to understand, they're all mobsters out there. Would you not call that bias?
As an African-American man who has been stopped and searched by police in situations where such action was not warranted, I also carry with me an understanding of the mistrust that some citizens harbor for those who wear the badge.
Pretty unbelievable. Now, keep in mind, the New York Times is also reporting that Eric Holder will have the final say on whether the Justice Department will close the case on Officer Darren Wilson once and for all. Here with reaction, Brown family attorney Darryl Parks. Darryl, you know, everybody raced to judgment here. The President of the United States of America sent 3 White House representatives, 3, to the funeral of a guy that potentially was a cop killer, wannabe, who robbed a store, intimidated a clerk, charged a cop, tried to fight a cop for his gun. And then Al Sharpton rushes to judgment, and Eric Holder rushes to judgment. Doesn't all of this now, in retrospect, say a lot about these 3 men?
Well, Sean, first and foremost, we have no official word from the Justice Department at this point. And the New York Times obviously has written an article based upon...
There is no civil rights charges here. It can't happen. You need to be able to prove that Darren Wilson had the intention of violating the civil rights of Michael Brown. You're never going to prove that in a million years, ever.
Now, let me say this, Sean, and we've always said, we all know that legally the federal standard is the highest standard that you'd ever have to meet in this situation. And thus, the real case relies with the state.
But
and I
the
think
President of the United States rushed to judgment. The Attorney General of the United States rushed to judgment. Al Sharpton, the President's best friend, 84 visits to the White House, you know, fueling the fire. And look at all those minority businesses that are gone forever.
They didn't judge it, Sean. I think what you saw, they didn't rush to judge it. What they were saying is that there was a certain element of our country that felt very strong about what had happened there and the process that had been taken as it relates to our judicial system.
You don't think the President sending 3 White House representatives to the funeral of Michael Brown sends a big statement, or the Attorney General talking about his life and his background, or the President's comments?
No, what it says is this. It doesn't rush to judgment about who's right or wrong in the situation. What it says is that they understand clearly that there's a huge element of our society that felt very strong, had very strong sentiments about what had happened. They didn't say it with a sensible tone and cadence like you just said it. They were out there fueling the fire, and minorities lost their businesses, their life savings up in flames, gone. Well, let me say this. Let me say this.
And I haven't heard him talk about that.
What the AG said was he reflected on an experience that he had on the New Jersey Turnpike as a young man.
By rushing to judgment. Michael Brown, it turns out, was a thug. Michael Brown intimidated a clerk, fought for a cop's gun, according to multiple eyewitnesses, and charged an officer. That's not the behavior of somebody that deserves 3 White House representatives at his funeral, is it?
Sean, you're mixing 2 different things here.
Is that the behavior that a White House wants to send representatives to that guy's funeral based on what we know?
You shouldn't cut me off now. You shouldn't cut me off. What I'm saying to you is that what they reflect upon is the experience that we have as African-American men in this country. You can't relate to that experience. We're telling you what we've experienced and how they relate to what happened. But the President rushed
to judgment. The President, with the bully pulpit of that office, sends 3 people there. Seriously? A guy that was trying to maybe kill a cop by fighting for his gun and charging at him?
Well, no, I think you got to remember the irony of the story here is that Michael Brown still was an unarmed person. That's the irony. And
okay, but he tried to get armed, didn't he, when he fought for the cop's gun, according to witnesses, right?
But when he died on that street, he had no gun.
When he died, but he also got shot right in the top of the head that goes to the narrative that he was charging, right?
Well, I think as the country learns more about that shot, I think it'll be rather clear that the officer certainly had a chance to avoid what happened here.
Do you think he was a good person, Michael Brown, in the end? A guy that, if your son was on tape robbing a store, intimidating a clerk, fighting for a cop's gun, well, would you want the White House to send a representative to the funeral of a kid that acts like that?
Well, I think, again, you're missing a narrative here, Sean. I think it's a situation where anytime you see an unarmed person get killed, the public outcries that that's wrong. Now, the particular facts of the case are certainly open for some type of scrutiny.
There's a lesson to be learned here. Don't
There's
rob
a
a
lesson
store.
to be learned.
Don't rob a store. Don't intimidate a clerk. Don't fight cops for their guns, and don't charge at cops. There's a lesson.
Well, there's one more lesson. Don't shoot unarmed people, too. That's a lesson here, too.
Okay, then, but, all right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.